did an international internship. That's when I was called lucky. Then I co-authored research paper with various professionals from IIM. Was very lucky. I was running my own company in the forest of my field, and I was called lucky. Then I started working with the Ministry of Finance. I was called lucky again. Now, let's just revisit the instances I mentioned about, me being lucky, of course. When I landed that international internship, it was essentially 3,000 emails that I sent. And that is what landed me that internship. When I said that I co-authored a research paper with renowned professionals, well, I worked 90 plus hours a week along with managing college studies to convince the professor to co-author that research paper. When I say I was leading a business of my own, there were thousands of conversations that I had to manage stakeholder conflict. Then, when I say that I landed a job at the Ministry of Finance, there was a comprehensive effort that I took to really help hold conversations within the government to get me that job. While I have really leveraged strategic networking over the last decade, I'll share one significant example from my journey that will provide insight to you in respect of the biggest achievement I've achieved in my life yet. And this example will give you the toolkit to network. So, flashback to 2020. It was August, it was a Monday morning, and I was absolutely unmotivated to start the work week. I was dreading it. So I was working in capital markets, a very high paying job. I was managing 400 million funds for a hedge fund manager. And I didn't feel fulfilled. What did I do? Essentially, nothing at that point in time. I happened to have the newspaper in front of me, and according to my habit, I started to read it. The headline mentioned underutilized government assets, a lost opportunity for India. I was curious, and I researched about it, what the opportunity is, how should government help and go ahead with managing its assets. I found nothing. Now, to really satiate that curiousness, I drafted a plan, a detailed map to strategically network within the government. I started by looking at how the government functions, what are the different entities within the government, departments, autonomous government agencies, underutilized, this government companies that do not really perform well. So across these different segments within the government, I then identified leadership within each of these organizations. From this initial research, I gathered that the best way for me to network and make my mark, make me seen and heard, was to really network with those 15 individuals within the government who were leading some autonomous government entities in the government. Next step, I researched in detail about these renowned professionals, these leaders. I read about their work, their history, their interests, their teams. And eventually, all of this was for me to draft my opening statement because I wanted to impress them in the very first few words that I speak to them. And essentially, an opening statement can be anything that, adds value to their current work, to research well, or it can be a genuinely interesting question that you can ask them. So, ask them about their motivation to work in the industry. Ask them about the sector and the trends that they see in the industry. You need to gather that attention on them. Third phase, the most exciting one. How do you reach out to them? So, because these are renowned professionals, they would receive thousands of emails, thousands of LinkedIn messages every single day. What is the best way? Well, I figured that these professionals were really very active in government conferences, government events. So I went 500 kilometers each week I traveled to Delhi to attend these conferences, waited for hours just for a 10-minute conversation with them, and used my opening line, which gathered their attention, and eventually that 10-minute conversation translated into hours of this. All this effort with 15 individuals eventually landed me to a couple of very high professional relationships that are still my mentors. And it's a blessing to have mentors that are so renowned in the industry. This one professional who is my biggest mentor and supporter even now eventually connected me to the finance minister. And I joined the government of India. The prize is asset monetization initiative. Now, this was one of the largest initiatives that the government had planned. And I joined a 4-member core team that was given just one page on indicating the government's intention to monetize assets, nothing else at all. It was essentially like working in a startup, but in a government system. So, in the very initial month of my participation with the Ministry of Finance, I figured that the assets, while they were monetizable, selling these assets was not the best way for the government to generate value. And the government would also look at leasing or co-developing these assets, and that would generate much better value for the government. When I shared this insight with the ministry, I received a huge backlash. However, despite this backlash, I persevered and eventually took my idea global. I networked with at least 18 federal governments across the world to get their insights and expert advice on how they manage their government assets. From their inputs and from a lot of extensive financial analysis, I eventually presented a concept paper to the finance minister, which created the first and the only government entity that will monetize and manage government-owned assets. This has generated about 60% additional value from what it could have generated had it just monetized via state of. So, with all these efforts, I didn't make out that something amazing. As I know why. Because it would make it into smaller steps. It is evident that all that I did to build my network. So, I really urge you all to think about this skill very seriously. And maybe I've been helpful enough to provide you with that framework on how we can go about creating the network. And essentially, I believe your network will go a long way for you to leverage your profession. So start now. Lastly, I'll just end by saying that you need to use your strategic network because it will help you overcome fears and it will help you enable making a larger impact in the world around you, one audacious dream at a time. Thank you.